Hey guys, welcome back to Freaky Friday! I'm excited to get back to reading some scary stories to get us in the mood for Halloween. I'm going to read 3 stories today. 2 of them are kind of on the longer side. So I'm going to just do 3 today probably. So like I said, I'm excited to be reading scary stories again. I forgot to grab myself some tea or hot apple cider like normal, but feel free to do that now. In the next one, I will make sure to grab some beforehand. So yeah. So the first story is called Help Me. My childhood home was in a small town in Indiana. It was a beautiful blue Dutch colonial home in a neighborhood lined with huge old pine trees. Our house had been built in the 1800s, and I always had a sense that it was haunted. The neighborhood was filled with kids my age, and all the families got together for summer block parties. Pretty idyllic. The only bad thing about our neighborhood was that at the end of our cul-de-sac was the town's hospital. Our hospital kind of looked like a brick version of Hogwarts, maybe with less spires. It wasn't too bad except that the parking lot and entrance for the emergency room essentially backed up to several of our backyards. Every once in a while we'd be woken up by an ambulance. On special occasions, a helicopter would land behind our house to fly a patient to Indianapolis or Cincinnati, and the adults would bring the little kids out in our jammies to watch it land and take off. Kind of morbid, I realize. Other than the noise and the bustle of the emergency room, we rarely noticed the hospital. Sometimes we would tell ghost stories about the people who died in the hospital and how they wandered through our neighborhood in the afterlife. One night in early January, several inches of snow had fallen. As a second grader, I was looking forward to the prospect of a snow day and stayed up later than normal. The snow even muffled the ambulances that came in and out in the night. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I woke up. You know when you heard something in your sleep and it wakes you up? It was one of those instances. I sat up but heard nothing at first. I didn't see any light from under my parents' bedroom door, so I knew they were still sleeping. I laid back down to try and fall back asleep when the noise that had woken me up came again. It's a noise that still haunts me. It was a low moan, like someone quietly sobbing. I was perfectly still, trying to make sure I was hearing a human. Indeed, I was. The low moan turned into a sad, sing-songy, "Help me," over and over. My mind instantly went to our neighborhood ghosts. I could tell it was coming from downstairs, so I snuck out of bed. My bedroom was at the top of our staircase, and looking down it, I could see right out the back door and onto our back deck. I could see several inches of snow blown up against the glass sliding door. The moaning continued, and I was convinced it was downstairs. I crept to the top of the carpeted stairs and hunched down to listen. As soon as I hunched down, I saw her. There was a face of a woman at our back door. Her hair was frozen from the snow, and she was wearing a hospital gown. Her tears were frozen on her cheeks. She was barefoot, and she was crying for help. She looked right through the door and up at me, and I froze. Her moaning got louder, and I felt like it would shatter the glass on the sliding door. She began to pull at her gown and a dressing on her arm. When she finally looked away, I felt like I could move, and I bolted. I ran to my dad and woke him up, crying that a neighborhood ghost was out in the snow. He ran to the stairs, saw the ghost, and immediately called 911. It turns out a patient in the dementia/Alzheimer's wing had gotten out, barefoot and lost, and she had found her way to our home. The orderlies quickly came and got her. I don't know if she lived much longer after that. She had to have had hypothermia. After that, we tried to avoid the hospital. Like, if we didn't pay attention to it, its ghost couldn't find us. Even though my family moved from that home several years later, on a particularly cold and snowy night, I sometimes still dream about that poor woman. She may not have been a ghost, but she was haunted. I don't know why I like that one, but like I did, because even though it's not like supernatural, it's terrifying. Like, I cannot imagine that happening. I would freak out so hard. My next story is called John. My freshman year of college, I attended a small women-only liberal arts college in Virginia. It's gone co-ed the last few years, but at this point it wasn't. I'm from California and was a little worried about being alone and on my own, so far from home. So I requested a room in the dorm's no-man hallway. The other residents were a bunch of other girls like me, mostly freshmen, all of us from religious or otherwise conservative households. The only men allowed on the hallway, besides the occasional father moving things in and out for their daughter, were maintenance workers, and they had to announce themselves by bellowing, "Man on the hall," whenever they came up. From day one, something was wrong with that hallway. It started with an eerie feeling of being watched and escalated into things like radios and the showers in the communal bathroom at the end of the hall being turned on and off, apparently of their own free will, to things being moved around girls' rooms. That kind of thing. Typical haunting stuff. It started out as being very benign, and we all joked about it and how we had representatives of the 3 major religions on the hall, and at least one of us should be able to perform an exorcism if need be. So September and most of October passed with general activity, and then things began to get creepy. The entire hall was woken in the middle of the night when someone ran up and down banging on every door. You'd walk into the bathroom to find every tap in the sink spewing hot water full blast. Radios that had never acted up before would be turned on, and whatever it was started getting nasty. It would pull our hair when we were out in the hall talking or push us in the bathroom. Nothing terrifying, but alarming. And worse, it moved out of the hallway and bathroom and started coming into our bedrooms more and more. So I was really scared, but trying to be brave and not telling my family about the ghost. My mom got the story out of me one night when we were talking on the phone, and I admitted to being scared. My mom is pretty sensitive to spirits, and she was alarmed. I tried to play it off as no big deal and went about my college life. The next day I came back to the dorm from class, walked into my bedroom, and there was a man sitting in my desk. He was not flesh and blood bone man, though. He was more of a shadow, an outline, but I could see him clearly. I think I stood in my doorway for about a year and a half staring at him until he raised a hand at me. Raised a hand like he was greeting me, inviting me in. So I freaked out and ran down to the bathroom where all the showers were running. There was no one else home on the hallway. From that day on, he was always there sitting in my room. If I was bopping around with my iPod, I'd see him sitting on my chair or on my bed. If I needed the chair, he'd move to the desk or sometimes to my roommate's bed. I never saw him clearly. He was always a shape, an outline, more of an impression than anything else. But he was there, and he was real, and eventually I started to call him John. He was tall and kind of thin and gave me the impression of an older gent who wore cardigans and a tie, like Gregory Peck as Atticus Finch. I like John. Because here's the thing, from the day he arrived in my dorm room, whatever was on that hallway left me alone. It would still run around and bang on every door, except mine. It would mess around with everyone's stuff, except mine and my roommates. Everyone else's phone would ring and have no one on the other end. Never mind. Other girls' food would disappear from the commercial fridge or end up spattered in the sink. Other girls would find their clothes tampered with. Other doors would find their posters and crap messed up. We all decorated our front doors. My room? Nothing. I didn't mention John to anyone. I was having a rough time. My roommate and I were fighting, and I was realizing that I really didn't like college at all. One night around Thanksgiving, some church friends and I watched The Ring as an activity, and then they dropped me back at the dorm. I felt sick walking in, like I was being watched. All the way down the long hallway to my room, I could feel whatever was watching me, waiting. All the lights were on, but I was so scared that I thought I was going to cry. I made it into my room, curled up in my bed. My roommate was, of course, gone for the weekend, and wished that I were home. I could hear the thing outside running up and down the hallway. I had just watched a terrifying movie. I was 18 and small and scared. I got my blankets up around me and just cried. After a while, I realized I wasn't alone. Somehow I knew that as long as he was there, whatever was in the hall, and there had been some interdimensional talk about getting the place blessed, would not come into my room and would not hurt me. For whatever reason, he was protecting me. On my last morning at college, I got up at 4 o'clock to meet a taxi to take me to the airport. I got dressed, ate a bowl of cereal in the tiny communal kitchen, put the bowl in the sink, walked to my room to bring my suitcases down to the elevator. As I waited for the elevator, something in the kitchen behind me exploded. I walked over to the doorway and looked in. An egg in a pot had been heated until it cracked. The ring on the stove that it stood on was red hot. I'd been standing in the kitchen 3 minutes before and there hadn't been anything on the stove. And no one else was awake. I turned back to the elevator and saw John standing next to my suitcase. The doors opened and we walked inside, and he was with me all the way across campus to the taxi by the front doors of the main building. I was so relieved to leave that place behind me as I drove away, though at that point I was still planning on returning in January. Spoiler, I didn't. At home in California, I told my mom everything from my disappointment in the college as a whole, the haunting. I told her about the thing in the hallway and about how it never came to my room after my own personal guardian angel showed up. I described how he would sit in my chair and keep watch, and she laughed. "Sounds like my great-granddad," she said. "When I was little, he'd always keep an eye on his kids. He didn't like bullies, and he had no patience at all for the supernatural. He believed in it, but he didn't like it haunting us." The entire side of my family is Mormon, and they all believed in and had experiences with ghosts. My great-grandfather, who I'd never even heard of, apparently had no problem with performing exorcisms or casting out spirits, and was widely believed to be good at it. He was fiercely protective of his family, too. He died when my mom was a teenager in the late 60s, and his name was John. That was kind of a long one, but I've liked it. I don't know, because, a lot of these ghost stories, your ghost is always, the enemy. And, this had a bad ghost, too. But it also had, a friendly ghost that was just protective. And I really like that. So, my last story, and it's a long one, I'll try and get through it, is called We Discovered a Creature in the Rocky Mountains. Project Erebus is the official name, and I believe it is the public's right to know of the creature that has entered our world. My team and I do not have a title, but I would refer to us as government contractors. Our primary objective is to study the unexplainable phenomena and report back to the federal government. We set up wherever we're needed. Our team currently resides inside an underground bunker just outside of Yellowstone National Park. You can search all you want, but I guarantee you will not be able to locate it, and it's better that you don't. The location of the creature was discovered 1 year ago by local hikers, a young married couple. Their names have been removed from all public record. Since then, the government's focus has been on reinforcing construction of the underground facility, containment of the creature, and studying it as much as possible. The two hikers were led to the dwelling when they followed a trail of animal carcasses. The trail stretched several hundred yards and eventually led to a cave opening between two large pine trees. The hole is described as a perfect circle about 10 feet in diameter. The discovery was reported when the husband made a distress call to local park rangers. His wife claimed she smelled the sweetest aroma coming from inside the subterranean lair. As the husband attempted to remove her from the area, she reportedly became violent and hysteric. Escaping from his grip, she sprinted to the hole, turned to smile at her partner, and gracefully fell backwards into the darkness of the cave. The husband reportedly ran forward and heard his wife's body hit the cave floor after a few moments. It was a 40-foot drop from the cave's opening. The husband stated that he heard the sounds of hoarse laughter coming from the cave below. The woman's remains were never located. When the feds were notified, we were called in for help with containment. We received an initial briefing that depicted a horrifying creature dwelling in a cave. Thus began construction of the bunker and the containment process. The creature we've been dealing with is far more sinister in nature than anything I've ever seen or studied. My one solid conclusion is that the being is otherworldly. Whatever it is invisible to all video recordings, both digital and film. The live footage shows the cave as completely empty, and all recorded files are corrupted. We are unable to study it from a distance. Containing the beast was nearly impossible. We eventually trapped it by sealing the entrance that the aforementioned hiker fell in. Our team then drilled our own opening and barricaded it with a steel blast door. There are only a few humans who have seen it with the naked eye. A retired captain known as Walsh was the first. It was my first day on Project Erebus when we lost him. Equipped with his 9mm sidearm, Walsh entered the cave around 6 a.m. on Monday morning, and the massive steel door was quickly shut behind him. He immediately began to complain of heat, claiming the temperature was unbearable. The facility's thermometer showed the cave at only 55 degrees. His complaints of the heat were followed by several minutes of silence. Walsh's voice boomed out of the intercom speakers. "Let us out! How can you people be so blind?" Looking at the monitor, we saw nothing but an empty cave, but Walsh could obviously see something. We spoke into the receiver. "Walsh, what is it? Tell us what you see." He hissed a response. "Worthless swine! All of you, let us out!" Our team looked around in a state of panic and confusion. Walsh was staring directly at the center of the cave as interior lights rapidly strobed. For a moment, the creature showed itself for the first time on film. I saw the outline of a dark humanoid being sitting on the ground, cross-legged, with one hand in the air and the other resting on the ground. Walsh began to move out of frame, back towards the entrance. The video feed cut out. Rapid whispers came through the speakers and sounded like 100 voices in unison. Our team sat in silence, waiting for something, anything. The silence was interrupted by 3 loud knocks from the other side of the steel blast door. Our defense unit got into position, rifles aimed at the doors as it was opened. To our relief, a seemingly unharmed Walsh crossed the threshold and stood in the open doorway. Our relief turned to horror. It was his eyes. I can still picture them. The image were forever burned in my mind. His eyes were a blank canvas of white, absent of irises and pupil. 2 steady streams of blood ran from his tear ducts down his cheeks, creating 2 crimson puddles on the stone floor. He just stood there, silent and unblinking. We were shocked, unsure of what to do or say. He broke the silence again. "It can smell us. It's hungry," he said in a whisper as he raised the pistol to his temple. It wasn't the shot that frightened me the most, or the explosion of gore that painted the walls behind him. What horrified me the most was the massive, jet-black, 3-fingered hand that pulled Walsh's lifeless corpse back into the cave just before the blast door was slammed shut. I will never forget the sound of his tearing flesh. All records of Walsh were deleted. Even a personal email chain between us was erased without my consent or knowledge. After the incident, nobody wanted to enter the cave. Many of us, including myself, tried to abandon the project. The officials told us that leaving the site would be considered treasonous and we would regret the decision. The feds decided to send in one of their own. I do not know his real name, but they referred to him as X. He was a middle-aged, muscular man with salt and pepper hair. By the way he carried himself, you could tell he was in charge and not to be messed with. Someone in the room described him as unbreakable. Before he went in, we concluded that looking at the creature with the naked eye was too risky. We sent X in with carbon fiber protective glasses equipped with impenetrable plexiglass lenses. The blast doors opened, and X confidently walked inside. As soon as the doors closed, we lost audio. We repeatedly tried to reach him, only to be met with static. An hour passed with no response. Panic grew in the facility as we waited, praying that we would not be chosen to go in after him. Just before we lost hope, a fury of knocks and screams came from the other side. We opened the door, and a ghost white X came crawling out. The unbreakable man was on the floor, screaming hysterically as he held his hands over his ears, as if he was protecting them from some unbearable noise. He repeatedly screamed, "Its name! It's told me its name!" Medical staff raced to his side, attempting to settle him down. It was no use. He squirmed in agony until one of the doctors injected him with a sedative. It took 5 men to hold him still. I never saw X again, but the story of what happened to him spread around like a disease. His eardrums have somehow been completely removed while inside the cave. The feds brought in their top psychiatrist to analyze X. With his loss of hearing, the doctor reverted to writing questions on a small notepad for him to read. During the session, X got up and whispered the name of the creature in her ear. It's on record that the second X whispered the name, he instantly lost the ability to speak, and the psychiatrist appeared to enter a trance state. Both of them were found dead the next day, hanging from rafters in their individual rooms. From the evidence we have gathered, the creature seems to be stealing human senses: the hiker's smell, Welch's sight, and X's hearing. The reason I'm telling this story to the world is because I genuinely believe it is too late. 3 more caves have been discovered, all with 10-foot openings and a trail of dead animals leading to them. We have no idea how many more there are. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this edition of Freaky Friday. I love reading scary stories. I really liked that last one actually. It's really scary. So yeah, I hope you guys love this video. I'm excited for the next one. I love October. It's so much more fun than any other month of the year. Alright. Voldemort. Alright you guys, I love you so much and I will see you later.